Time doesn't erase murder. It just hides it better. They said the case was closed. They said no one was watching. But someone always is. This is Santana True Crime.
Welcome to Santana True Crime. Tonight, we're covering a case that might not be dominating every feed at the moment, but remains one of the most watched and most discussed cases in 2025, the Karen Reed case. With the second trial now complete, Karen Reed found not guilty. A lot of people think that the story is over, but the truth is the case remains unfinished, and there are still some major questions surrounding the first trial, major issues that resurfaced during the retrial, and now an entirely new chapter opening with the civil trial, one that could expose evidence of misconduct, claims, and details the criminal trial never fully addressed. So tonight, we're breaking down all the issues, the first trial, the retrial, and the civil case. With me tonight is Laura. Laura, I know that you've watched this trial carefully because you're the one that told me about it. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's get into it. First of all, I wanted to start out with why you're on the show to begin with. I believe you've got a podcast that's going to be coming out soon. Do you want to tell us about it?
It's still kind of baking, but I have a new channel called From Garden to Glow where I am going to be focused on lifestyle, health, fitness, gardening, home improvement, DIY stuff, just kind of basic lifestyle for healthy or trying to be healthy moms with a lot of things on their plate. So it's brand new. I haven't posted anything yet. I'm just gathering content, and I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I'm looking forward to checking that out. All right, well, let's get into it. So I wanted to start out with the basic facts of the case that everyone agrees on. And that is that between January 28th and 29th of 2022, Karen Reed and her boyfriend, that was a Boston police officer, John O'Keefe, they decided to go out to meet for some drinks. We know it, they drove separately, and they end up going to the Waterfall Bar and Grill in Canton, Mass. We know that the weather is really bad, and maybe not from people from that area, but being in North Carolina, that sounds like a natural disaster. There's heavy snowfall, the temperatures are low, but it appears from the bar footage that there's a lot of people out there.
Yeah, I would say being originally from New England, that was a bad storm, even for New England natives. That's not the type of storm that you probably want to be out driving in after drinking. But I think that when they finally left the bar, being the small town Canton, Massachusetts bar, I think that they closed around midnight and they all headed back to Brian Albert's home for an after party. So,
But Brian Higgins was with them. So
yeah. So the
at the
story,
bar, right.
John O'Keefe was a Boston police officer, became a Canton police officer when his sister passed away, and he ended up with guardianship of her two children because the sister's husband passed away shortly after.
So we've got Brian Albert and Brian Higgins, and we've got John O'Keefe, and they're all in the police family. That's the easiest way to put it.
They all are.
This
Yeah.
is an informal group of police officers that meet for drinks. No surprise there. And Brian Albert decides to invite everyone back to his home, which is a few miles away in Canton, correct?
Yes. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting story because the story that they all kept repeating in the first trial was that little Brian, so Brian Albert has a son Brian whose birthday it was. Everybody was out celebrating his birthday except for Brian, little Brian Albert Jr. He was at home with a couple of friends celebrating his birthday. So they all went back, and the story is everybody sang happy birthday to him over and over and over and over and over again all night long. So That is kind of the setting for the evening.
So Karen is going to be the driver going back to the Alberts house, and she's got a black Lexus SUV, and John O'Keefe is in the passenger seat, we presume.
Yep.
We know that, or most people agree that Karen did make it to the house with John,
Right.
correct?
Yeah, that seems to be undisputed.
And this is when the disputes start, besides how many drinks Karen had, because we
A
know that
lot. Too
she admitted
many.
to right.
Too many. Yeah.
Too many, definitely,
Yeah.
but, she gave interviews where she tried to minimize that. Uh, she should probably have not been driving, I think would be a fair statement.
And I think she would agree. And that was one of the things that really sort of surprised me with this case. Is just these are a bunch of, middle-aged, 40, 50. These people have adult children, and they're all the amount that they drink. Brian Albert and Brian Higgins had been drinking all day. They had driven back from New York for another, I think it was another police officer's funeral. I don't recall, but they had just that day driven back from New York, and they had really indicated that they had been drinking all day long. And then the in the when they did some of the video footage, because they hadn't started off at the waterfall, that's just where they ended up. But on they had counted like something like Karen had been served 9 drinks that night.
Right, and I know that her defense was that she didn't drink them all.
Yeah,
Right.
right. And maybe she didn't. I don't know. If I had ever had 9 drinks in my life, I'm sure I would be dead.
You would probably be dead, correct. Well, I think what
How
we
would you know
can
that?
yeah, I think we can agree that Karen shouldn't be driving and that at one point she drops John off at the Alberts. She tells John to or her claim is that she wanted John to go inside and make sure that it was okay for them to come in because they don't see any lights on in the house.
Yep, exactly. I mean, pretty much verbatim. She didn't seem like there was a whole lot going on. It was dark, so she wanted him to go inside, check it out to make sure it was really okay if they were really invited.
And again, her claim is also that John went into the house and that she waited for a period of time and then thought that John just wasn't coming out and he's not answering his phone. And so she
Yeah. Yeah, so
goes ahead and leaves.
it doesn't sound, I don't think that she was necessarily sure that he ever actually set foot into the house, but he went up, at least approached the house, and then a minute or two went by and he hadn't come back, and so she was started to call him and text him, and obviously there was no she never spoke to him again.
And so we know that she went back to her house,
She
or
went
was
back to John O'Keefe's house in Canton.
that's right. She went back to his house, and that's when she started the barrage of phone calls, right? Of the "Where are you? You're an asshole."
I think she continued them. Yeah, there was a large enough number of phone calls and raging voicemails that it was pretty clear that if she hit him right, in that small chance that she hit him, that she had no idea, because of her demeanor and of the way she was screaming hysterically. Yeah.
So she then decides to go and look for him because he's not answering his phone and he hasn't come back, and she's getting legitimately concerned.
Yeah, I think she actually had fallen asleep for a while. I think that, she had had a lot to drink. She got back to the house. I think they said she connected to his internet, a couple of minutes, really only a couple of minutes later. And then early morning hours. So this was like a little bit shortly after midnight that all of this went down. And I think that they had her connecting to John's Wi-Fi at like 12:35 a.m. The timeline is kind of forever changing, but and then I think it was around 3 or 4 in the morning that then she woke up and realized like John never came home. And then started calling everybody, called Jennifer McCabe, called Carrie Roberts, and then figured that they needed to all go out looking for him.
So they go back to Fairview Road where John was dropped off.
Yep.
And that's when she noticed John is in the front yard, essentially.
Yep.
And she rushes over. She sees that he's non-responsive, and she starts to perform CPR, and that's when 911 is called.
Yeah, so I think Karen and Carrie went over to John and started to try to do, normal life-saving measures on top of a lot of just screaming and sheer panic. And Jennifer McCabe placed the creepy 911 phone call.
What did you find creepy about it?
What was just what stood out to me the most on the 911 call is how when the 911 operator had asked if they were going to perform CPR, it was like she knew he was already dead, and she was saying, "I don't think you understand, he's dead." And it's like, why would you just, if this is your friend, if you're just finding your friend on the lawn, why would you immediately just assume he's dead and not try to do CPR or whatever? Like, I don't think you would ever. I don't know. It's hard to be in that situation because I've never been in that type of emergency situation. But my first initial reaction is never going to be, "Oh, he's dead. He might need some CPR. Maybe does he have a pulse or whatever." So I'm on like at the body, checking for signs of life, doing CPR, trying to warm him up. But she was just telling the 911 operator, like, "No, he's dead. Like, I think he's dead." She immediately went to, "He's dead," not, "What can we do to save our friend?"
And I think that's a fair assumption to make, that a lot of people would be in the opposite of, they're pumping on a dead body or they're doing
Yeah.
things to a person that, I've seen people that have been in rigor mortis and the family wants to try to intervene. And you've got to tell them
Right.
that, yeah, like there's nothing we can
Right.
do here. Um,
Yeah, and I think because he had been outside in the cold, and his body temperature was obviously really had been dropping. I mean, I think when the first thing you would assume is that he's maybe got hypothermia and try to warm him up. You know, sc- Banging down the doors on the house to get comforters and whatever you can. Um, from the because he was on the lawn, the front lawn of the Alberts house. But no, he's dead.
well, let's talk about what happens when law enforcement gets there. I know that some of the issues that occurred where the crime scene was a huge issue. I'd like to talk about that. And I think that that's part of the reason why this case has so many problems and why we haven't been able to get clear answers is that you've got someone that is obvious to a lot of people that he's dead, he's deceased, he's not coming back. So, from a police officer's point of view, that's a crime scene. So, the first thing that you do at a crime scene is you secure it. That means blocking off the road, that means roping off that yard, and that means knocking on the door of the house where you've got a body laying in front of it and talking with the people inside. Did any of that happen?
So the first responders came to the crime scene first, right? So they were obviously focused on and whatever life-saving measures that they could, and then no, and then when police pulled up, when Canton police pulled up, nobody went into the house until later that day, and even then, it was just to interview people. They didn't secure the crime scene, and their excuse was that because of the conditions it was impossible to get crime scene tape up, They didn't have anybody guarding the crime scene while they investigated. And then I think I think there was a meeting at the house with a bunch of folks, including law enforcement, but it was they never looked around. They had, according to them, as they tell it, they had tunnel vision and only saw where they talked to the residents. So yeah, no, it was not handled like a crime scene should be handled whatsoever.
Some more fun facts about that is that that's kind of funny that they say that crime scene tape can't be put up. When for those that are listening that don't understand what crime scene tape actually is, it's not an actual tape. It's plastic. You tie it to things. It does not stick to things. So it
Right.
doesn't matter if it's raining or dry. You tie it to trees and make a big perimeter. And those are the type of things that you should have in the trunk of your car, as well as evidence bags and
Hmm.
collection kits. And that's another issue that we had at this crime scene where the patrol officers go knocking on the next door neighbor's house to get solo cups and was it like save
Stop and shop
value?
bags. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Shopping bags. So
Yeah. So that was their evidence collection kit. And then they
yeah.
borrowed a
So
leaf blower.
I think they collected the blood samples, which I don't think there was much blood at all, which is another factor that we'll probably talk about later. But they collected evidence in these solo cups and stuck them inside these stop and shop bags. And then I think later on they came back to the crime scene to look for more evidence in, daylight hours. And yeah, they used a leaf blower to start moving some of the snow. And they were proud of themselves for coming up with that solution. Um, yeah, that was that. You listening to that first trial, you were literally like, "Is this a really just really poorly scripted TV show? Because this is an absolute joke. This isn't a small. I mean, sure, it's a small suburb outside of Boston, but it's not like you know a tiny town out in the middle of nowhere where no crime happens. So they don't have to carry, they don't have to carry around evidence kits.
Yeah, and I know they later got audited by the state, and that was one of the issues that they were dinged on was that the officers did not have an evidence room. So most departments will have a room that's dedicated to processing evidence. There'll be lockers, there'll be evidence bags, evidence cards, whatever forms you need, all that. They did not have that, and officers did not have access to evidence bags with them, which is something that you need when you're um, collecting things properly. I wanted to also get into that no canvas was done, right? Like they weren't knocking on doors asking if someone saw anything or if the person has a camera in their house.
So so the neighbor, I think the neighbor who provided the solo cups and the shopping bags had some kind of tie to somebody in the Canton Police Department. And yeah, mysteriously he reviewed his ring camera footage and lo and behold found nothing to turn over to the police that would have been that showed anything. AKA, I think he deleted it, but what do I know?
So at some point, Karen Reed is taken into custody after a very brief period of time, in my
Correct.
opinion.
Yeah.
And her SUV is also taken. And part of their reasoning was that they believe that Karen Reed backed into John O'Keefe, which broke the tail light on Karen's SUV.
Yeah, they're saying that according to the SUV data that she hit him, put the car in reverse at 75% acceleration and hit him going about 24 or and backed up going about 24 miles per hour, which I don't even know how you can do that. I don't know. I think if I tried to do that, I would end up in somebody's living room You think you would lose control so fast, and I can understand pushing down on the accelerator if you're stuck in some snow, but I can't ever imagine getting up to 24 miles per hour. Like, she didn't hit anything else. There were no tire marks off road. Like, I that was pretty good accuracy, I have to say, if she was able to hit him going that, control her vehicle going that fast in reverse.
Yeah, and we might as well just jump into the first trial, because that is the theory of the prosecution, right? That
Correct.
Karen was arguing with John, and when John walked around the back of the car, she puts in reverse and slams into him. And then that made John somehow make it into the front yard.
Correct.
That be fair to say?
And that she left him there to die in the cold.
Yes. And like you're saying, the prosecution brought in their expert witnesses, but one of the expert witnesses was the uh, state medical examiner, which looked at the body, and she concluded that she believed that he was not hit by a car.
The medical examiner who did John's autopsy concluded that he died because of blunt force trauma, and possibly, although not she wasn't able to say for sure, hypothermia. She was not able to conclude that it was by a vehicle or a homicide or anything, and knew all the facts of the case, right? Knew the police theory, but just and that so that was it. It was a little bit, I would say vague, but definitely not like he was definitely hit by a car for sure.
And so Karen has Alan Jackson, who is a very prominent defense attorney, and she brings in an entire legal team. I think this is probably the best legal team since O.J. Simpson,
Yeah,
if not
it,
better.
it was is a pretty effective legal team for sure.
And they're poking holes in every single story,
Yep.
to include not only of how poor the police did at investigating this, but then they find a video, which I'm about to share with you, of a possible explanation of what happened. All right, so we're going to play this. This is Karen Reed's video at John O'Keefe's house. So she's backing out of her driveway, and then you can hear a crack. Just heard the crack.
Now, true talking, that correct?
Yes.
Now, point from this video, are you able to discern who the operator of that vehicle?
And so that is their theory, that the reason why Karen Reed has this damage is because she's, got into a car crash when she was on the way back to go look for John O'Keefe.
Yeah, and in
And
the sorry.
go ahead. No,
I was
please.
going to say, and in the second trial, one of the experts had testified that if the tail light cover was missing, that the light underneath is not white, that the light underneath truly is red. So it wouldn't like in that, I don't know if you saw in that video, but they kind of made it look like, and I don't, it could have been a glare from the light on the Ring camera, but there's a little bit of a strip of white. So of course there's speculation that they modified the video, and that tail light is cracked and broken at that time because she had hit John O'Keefe, and that's why it was glowing white rather than red. But apparently the way that vehicle, that the lighting, the taillights are made is it wouldn't be, it would be off. So that's a little bit questionable too. But yeah, they are showing, the defense is showing that she did back in to his SUV while she went out looking for him, or went over to Jennifer McCabe's house.
We also learned during the trial about multiple shady figures in this whole case. One
Oh.
of them being Michael Proctor, who is the lead investigator of the case. Do you want
Yep.
to tell everyone about his credibility and some issues that he had during the trial?
I feel like Michael Proctor is a household name at this point, but yeah, in a nutshell, he immediately went after, put it all on Karen Reed, said all the evidence pointed to Karen Reed, did not follow police protocols, did police reports eventually, maybe, after talking to the witnesses, did not collect evidence, did not keep evidence logs, kind of made it sound like, oh, that's just the way we do things here at the Massachusetts State Police. Turns out his wife is like best friends with um, one of Nicole Albert's siblings. I think it was Julie Albert, who was married to Chris Albert, who is Brian Albert's brother. So again, it's kind of like this incestuous police family going on. And so Michael Proctor, there's speculation that he planted the taillight. They because the car was in the Sally Port for a long period of time. And then of course we learned in the first trial that the Sally Port security video was inverted. So what you thought you were looking at was the passenger side rear tail light in the video, but you were looking at the driver's side. And so, but the damage happened on the passenger side. So there's speculation that during that time, and then there's parts of that Sally Port video that are missing, that he's breaking, kind of like breaking pieces off the taillight and planting it on at 34 Fairview, which that was just the beginning of it. I mean, he was ultimately fired from Mass State Police as a result of the just horrific text messages that he sent, completely dehumanizing Karen Reed. Like, I get it. Like, I think if you think if you really truly believe she's guilty, and maybe he did, you want them to pay the price, but there was this real intense effort to make sure she looked guilty, and it was odd. It was just things didn't add up. And I think in other cases, when you look at other cases of that Michael Proctor was involved in, there's evidence that he does know what an evidence, truly he does actually know how to properly account for evidence in an evidence log and do police reports in a timely manner. So it was just very shady. I think that in a nutshell was just, he was a disgrace to the Mass State Police and that whole crew. I mean, his supervisor was Yuri Buchanan, who, of course, because Michael Proctor was no longer employed with the Mass State Police, he testified in the second trial, and it was just his testimony. Honestly, his testimony alone, I think if I was a juror, would have made me acquit her.
Yeah, and
So.
we'll get to that in a second. Before we do, I want to cover a few more people, to include Brian Higgins' factor, because we learned that Brian Higgins was actually having we'll call it an affair with Karen Reed. They're having inappropriate text messages. Yeah, again, Karen is in a relationship with John O'Keefe. They're living together. And we learned that Brian Higgins and her had been texting. And Brian Higgins also, what is really shady that I find is this whole butt dial incident, where
Yep.
after that night of drinking, Brian Higgins decides to go to the Canton Police Department at, I believe, 1:30 in the morning. And he's captured on video walking down the hallway. He claims that he may have butt dialed Brian Albert multiple times, but the prosecution does not agree with that. I'm going to try to play this video. All right, so what we are looking at this is from News Nation, courtesy of them on YouTube. And we're going to see Brian Higgins in the hallway. This is at the Canton Police Department. So I'm going to go ahead and roll it.
Stop. Do you recognize the person in this video?
It appears to be Mr. Brian Higgins.
Okay. Who did that appear to be walking away from the camera in this shot?
I'm not certain.
That you appear to be the same person as Brian Higgins?
It does appear that way, yes.
Okay, if we go ahead and play this through.
I just want to add that keep in mind this is at 1:30 in the morning after you've been drinking an entire night. And you were
Yeah,
at
and he
yeah,
claims that he would, go there and sleep it off,
that doesn't sound like a very good idea, but we're gonna keep the video
No,
rolling.
no.
All right, so here's Brian outside, and you can obviously tell he's holding
Does it
something in
appear
his hand.
from this video
Yes.
that the person has anything in his hand?
I really can't tell.
What do you see in that video?
It appears to be an individual wearing a black beanie hat, black dark colored sweatshirt with some design on it, and something illuminating by his face.
Something illuminating by his face.
Yeah. Yeah, so the story with him, I think he said that I think his story has changed in the past year. Like he went there to move cars, but like in that outdoor video they show him he literally moved one car and then moved some stuff like a bag from one car to his car, from his car to another car. But other than that, there was like no real telling picture of like why he would be at the Canton Police Department. He says he
Well,
has an office there. And
right.
so there were phone calls, according to the Cellbrite. There was a phone call exchange between him and or he called. There was a missed call. He called Brian Albert at early in the morning, and the Cellbrite report shows that Brian Albert answered the call. And Brian Albert said, "Oh, it must have been." So Brian Higgins claims, "Oh, that must have been a butt dial." And then Brian Albert claimed that he must have answered it via his butt as well. And then I think even like called him back, and it connected for like a short amount of time, 20 to 30 seconds, but long enough to have a quick conversation, right? So same thing happened with between Jennifer McCabe and Nicole Albert, that she had called in the morning after they came back, or they were all, I think after Karen, between the time that Karen Reed was driving to Jennifer McCabe's or driving home from Jennifer McCabe's house. So she showed up at Jennifer McCabe's house in the morning when she couldn't find John. And then Jennifer told her to go back home. I will meet you there and then we'll go look for him. In between that happening, there's a call from Jennifer McCabe to the Albert residence that shows as being answered. And they both, of course, they're all claiming that they never spoke to each other during, that phone call never really connected. So a lot of just shade, right? Just a lot. And then both Brians got rid of their phones one day before the preservation orders were presented. I think the preservation order against Brian Higgins, I think the judge ultimately denied it, but still somebody was tipping them off that they were coming, right? And they both of them destroyed their phones. Or Brian Albert got a new phone, and then Brian Higgins, took his phone apart in pieces and threw it in various dumpsters on an Air Force base, I believe.
Yeah.
So
And I think when you look at the totality of the circumstances,
right.
and I want to talk about the Alberts before we move on, but you definitely see people working in cahoots with each other. And
There's just too many things, like you said, like too many things that don't add up. And and I haven't watched a lot of trials recently, but even like with in the Brian Walsh case, right, which is going on right now, I was kind of interested in the testimony of Anna Walsh, who was the victim of her boy, basically her boyfriend, right? She was having an affair, and it was really not juicy or eventful at all. I mean, he just answered the questions. He seemingly answered them truthfully. There was no shade. There was no impeachment. There was no like, "Oh, why did you get rid of your cell phone?" Like nothing like that. And I'm sure that her lover wants Brian Walsh to be found guilty, right? But he just, he didn't have an agenda. He just got up there and told his side of the story. And that's how it should be, right? All these people are claiming that John is their friend. Just seems really, really shady. And obviously we all know Michael Proctor's connections to the family. She shouldn't have been investigating. So yeah, there's just too many things that don't add up. With every, you could pick apart, like with every single witness testimony in that first trial, you could pick something that's like, this doesn't make any sense. This sounds shady. This is a red flag. And so while I think a conspiracy theory amongst that many people sounds utterly insane, and that's what we thought going into the first trial, the more evidence and the more, and once even more so when the second trial went on, you're like, this is not right.
Well, before we go to the second trial, I want to bring up the Alberts and their behavior because this is kind of a question. Maybe I'm thinking about it differently, being in law enforcement for so long. But if I had a dead body in my front yard and I had police and
Right.
fire trucks outside and an EMS
Right.
truck and people screaming, I'm going to go outside and find out what's going on and see if I can help. What
And
Alberts do?
yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is Brian Albert had been a police officer for years, and so after some at some point after the second trial, they showed how close Brian Albert's bedroom window is to where John O'Keefe's body was found. And then during Jennifer McCabe's testimony in both trials, really, she testified like how Karen was just screaming like constantly and running back and forth, and all of these lights, all they're shining a bright light on the crime scene, and you got paramedics working on him. You've got police officers coming in one by one, and they claimed to have just completely slept through it until Jennifer McCabe entered the home through the unlocked front door, because we all, especially police officers, leave our front doors unlocked all the time, and allegedly bust into their bedroom and woke them up. And the dog never barked. Their German Shepherd never barked the whole time.
And the
And
German
then
Shepherd,
I still believe that Brian Albert never came out.
right? I believe you're correct that he never came out of his house, which is odd. And another odd fact about him is they end up rehoming the German Shepherd, and they also end up selling their home, which had been in their family for decades, as well as before they sold their home, they redid their basement floor.
Yeah. So there was you can look at the pictures on Zillow. It's 34 Fairview Road in Canton, Massachusetts. Like, I think everybody knows the address, but a couple of things. Um, the basement floor, you can see like they had it as they had their weight bench and things like that down there, and there apparently was a section of the concrete basement floor that they had to redo. That was very suspicious. The house, so you remember the housing market during COVID, everything, as soon as something hit the market, it was going for well over asking price. So they listed this home for 950, and that was on February 17th of 20, excuse me, November 17th of 2022. So like 10 months after it happened, right? They listed it for 949, and then they sold it for 905. So they actually took quite a big, I mean, you don't know the ins and outs of the real estate contract if they gave, I don't know. But that was just unheard of during that time, you know. Um,
And
so that
stuff
was
like
really a
that,
little suspicious.
right? I think by itself, it doesn't. It's not that strange. Or you could say, oh, well, you know what? They
Right.
were thinking about moving. They want to downsize. Same thing with the rehoming of a dog or
We don't even know, right?
the cell phone breaking.
They don't, I don't think we really even ever found out what happened to the dog, if the dog was rehomed or if the dog is no longer alive. Allegedly, Yuri Buchanan checked up on the dog, and the dog had been placed at another home in Massachusetts, but nobody believes him. Or not in Massachusetts, but somewhere else. But anyway, yeah, nobody believes him. Nobody went and got the vet records. I'm sure they didn't do a DNA test on the dog to see if it really was Chloe.
So a lot of these issues, and this was a very long trial. We don't have time to cover everything. We're hitting
Right.
the main points. But to say the least, the jury is not convinced that Karen Reed is guilty of every charge. right?
So in the first trial, they had marked her. I think that the way that the jury ended up is that she was not guilty on counts 1 and 3, and then and again, I could be wrong, but I know that they were hung on the second degree murder charge. They were not in sync there, so it ended up in a mistrial.
Well, let's go ahead and transition to trial number 2, where they retry
So
her.
so one more thing that I
Go
wanted to
ahead.
point out, and I wanted to ask you, um, when they said that John O'Keefe, there was not a lot of blood around him, and so if he wasn't already dead when he was placed out onto the lawn, wouldn't he have blood under him? Because he had that big gash in the back of his head, but they said like it wasn't like he was lying in a pool of blood or he bled out. Why would that be? Or is that normal?
With head injuries, there's a lot of blood, even if it's minor. So I would expect a lot of blood. I think that the biggest problem with this whole case is that from the very beginning, things weren't done properly. And so a lot of these questions, as far as was there a large amount of blood or not, or did they just not document that properly? You know, I think that's a question that I have, is how much blood was really there, and or was it that he was killed somewhere else and transferred, and that's why there wasn't a lot of blood, because he had already bled out,
He was already
which
and he
would
was
also
already dead. Yeah.
right. But I would expect to see a large pool of bloody snow where he is, because there's already snow on the ground. And
Yeah.
hopefully
So
that'd be something that they'd document when they're, processing the crime scene.
and I mean, I don't know because I'm not a first responder, right? So I don't know, would they, even if they were to work on the body, even if they thought, okay, this isn't a crime scene, do they not take photos right away? Is that, or would the police, when the police showed up, shouldn't they have taken photos like right away of everything?
So honestly, if they thought that he was dead and that his body was, there's no way that they can save him,
They
you're
wouldn't
supposed to
have,
leave
right?
the body there. That's the
Well,
best course of action.
right. But of course, they say that because it was so cold out and his body temperature dropped, they actually couldn't rule him deceased until they got his body temperature back up.
Yeah, and I understand that too. And if that's the case, then yeah, they're going to take him away. And anytime the EMS and fire gets involved, it complicates things from a law enforcement perspective, because they're
Sure.
trampling all over things. They're not taking into consideration, uh, you know, keeping the crime scene pristine, like we
Okay.
try
And
our
that makes
best to
sense.
do, right?
Yeah.
So we try to make sure that officers are going in one way and out the other. That way we're not tracking footprints around and disturbing things. There should be a crime scene recorder that's documenting everyone that comes in and out. And, again, like, you're doing your absolute best. You're treating it like an art museum. With them just coming in and throwing their bags down, trying to work on him, bringing in and out stretchers. A lot of things are going to naturally get moved
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
And so, I understand why they did what they did. And I'm glad that we've got people like that think like that of, hey, I'm going to give this person every last opportunity, they have to live or to try to save them. That's great. It just messes up things in the process. But after he is removed, that's when pictures should be taken, multiple pictures. And the other piece of this is that the only time that law enforcement is not going to take pictures, or take very few pictures, is when we absolutely know that this is a natural death. So if great grandma is in her bed and she doesn't wake up one morning and the family calls, we would go out and we would ask basic questions like, get her basic information. And then if she's on any medicine, does she have any medical issues? And then you would call the family doctor and ask if they would sign the death certificate, which is essentially having him agree that this is a natural death. Once that's done, you can call the funeral home and remove the body, and a
Got
report
it.
is still done to document
Okay.
it, but you're not going through the links that you would. And a lot of times what I would do is take pictures of like the prescription bottles just to be thorough and,
Well,
even though
well,
this lady was
remember, these
right.
police officers didn't take pictures because they didn't have cameras. They don't have phones with cameras either.
Right, which is just idiotic, right. Um, I mean, if you don't have the ability to do these basic investigations, and I'm not talking about having a homicide team that's dedicated to this. I'm talking about if your officers just don't have the basic equipment to do police functions correctly and safely, it really should be the state police that just takes over your department, and you should go and work traffic. And that's nothing against those guys. It's just that it ruins cases like this when from the very beginning things get, just
Yeah.
completely off the tracks.
Yeah, and I think that's why I fear that we will never really know what happened. Um, I'm not sure that the people, I think that the O'Keefes truly believe that Karen Reed i- is to blame. They've
Right.
accepted that, and they've been possibly brainwashed, but also like those people have been through so much trauma that
Right.
nobody can really blame them. But for me, just as a human being, I want the people who are responsible for this to pay, even if it is Karen Reed, which I don't think it is. I mean, I certainly do not think that I think it was very well proven in the second trial that he was not hit by a car.
So let's get to trial number 2. And I wanted to start off with why the state decided to retry this case, because it seemed like a disaster with the first case. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. And I don't know that we really know. I mean, I'm assuming they thought that the evidence was something other than it wasn't. I honest, and then we got Adam Lally was the like one of the regular Norfolk County district attorneys, and he didn't try the second case, and we don't know why, right? Was it because he wouldn't, because he's like, this is just BS and this case is a disaster, or did they think Hank Brennan could come in and just bully the jurors into finding her guilty? I don't really know. I do know that they tried to appeal it, but of course, because the jury wasn't polled in the courtroom at the end of the first trial, they couldn't really prove that the jury that it was like double jeopardy if they tried her again, because a lot of the jurors were coming forward saying that um they had come to a unanimous decision that she was not guilty of first degree murder. So that would be like the charges 1 and 3. But they didn't take those off the verdict form because they couldn't really, I mean, they couldn't then go poll the jury months later, right? So
Yeah.
it was retried.
And Hank Brennan, he's really the heavy hitter for the state. He's a former high profile defense attorney. He's represented the mob before, to include Whitey Bulger. And I thought that
Mm.
he did have a good strategy of just simplifying this to the jury of, this is someone that's drunk. Here's footage of her leaving the bar after having 9+ drinks. And here's her damaged vehicle. And then he did something that they didn't do in the first trial, which I'm sure Karen Reed's defense attorneys were not happy with. Karen Reed went on Dateline, and he played this
Yep.
clip for the jury, which we're about to see. So funny.
I didn't think I hit him, but could I have clipped him? Could I have tagged him in the knee?
I did not hit him, is what she said. Could I have tagged him in the knee?
And incapacitated him. He didn't look mortally wounded as far as I could see, but could I have done something that knocked him out and in his drunkenness and in the cold didn't come to again?
And this would have been the moment you dropped him off at the party.
Yeah, would have had to.
And you're gonna prepare from now.
So that's Hank Brennan that we ended that with as well. And again, I think that's a proper way to look at this case if you're in the
Yeah.
prosecutors, is that you simplify this completely, and then you do the thing that they also did, which is make sure that you do not call investigator Proctor at all. You try to completely leave his name out of the case. How do you think they did?
I mean, considering the evidence that they had, I think what hurt them in the second trial was just kind of the joke that was aperture. And that was their the accident reconstructionist that they paid, who was clearly bought, that they paid exorbitant amounts of money to in order to get him to say that hey, I could reconstruct this and John O'Keefe was hit by a car. And this was this Dateline clip that you saw was probably the most compelling, like, consciousness of guilt evidence that you could find directly from Karen Reed herself. So yeah, I probably would have used that as well.
Yeah, and I think that from that perspective, they did a good job of just,
Yep.
hey, let's keep this simple. Let's, that's something that you can explain to a jury very easily. Of this is just a simple case of a drunk driver hitting someone, and their whole theory was that she clipped him hard enough to break the tail light, and that's what cut his arm, and then he lost his balance, hit his head, and bled out, and that's why he died, right? Or knocked him unconscious, and then he froze to death. Either way, it involves a side swipe, is what they're boiling this down to.
Right. Yeah, and I think so in the second trial, I think the things that hurt them the most was Yuri Buchanan's testimony. So yeah, well, they didn't call Proctor because that was just going to be a complete disaster. And if the defense called him, then he's subject to cross-examination by Hank Brennan, right? But um then the Yuri Buchanan was just his testimony was, again, if you would have to go through and watch the whole thing, but like he just would not answer questions. He was very defensive. Definitely not the testimony that you would expect from a cop who was like, oh, this is all, I mean, look, we thought she was guilty. This is all that we did to collect evidence and prove that she was, right? No, it was just it was terrible. And then you had we had the medical examiner who could not really give conclusive, like, the actual one who did his autopsy maybe gave them the most help by saying that it was blunt force trauma and possibly hypothermia. But then you had other experts, that one was called by the prosecution, that Dr. Isaac Wolf. He was a neurosurgeon, and he basically got on the stand saying, oh yeah, I've seen cases where people get drunk one night, fall backwards, hit their head, and they have a gash from hitting the ice. um and then you had uh, the medical examiner from the state of Rhode Island. She was the chief medical examiner. La Posada, I think was her name. And she was basically like, he wasn't hit by a car. Like he has no broken bones, no bruises. She showed the X-rays that didn't show any fractures, any breaks, or any soft tissue swelling. And then you had the dog bite experts that they called, and she was in both trials, but she was a retired emergency room doctor. I think she was like a forensic examiner as well too. But anyway, she concluded that he was, the scratches on that you saw on his arm when they showed the pictures of his right arm were consistent with dog bites and claw marks, and from the pattern. And so there was all of these medical professionals. Forget about what the police did or didn't do in this case. Forget about like the crazy dramatic testimony by Jennifer McCabe. You had these medical doctors who couldn't say that he was hit by a car. And then on top of it, you had ARCA. And ARCA was, while the jury couldn't didn't know about this in the trial because Judge Bev wouldn't let it come in that there was a federal investigation. The defense used ARCA, who was originally hired by the feds to prove or to reconstruct the accident, and they were, light years ahead of the experts that the Commonwealth called to try to prove, to state that he was hit by a car. So that's really what I think, that they had better consciousness of guilt type of material in the second trial, but the whole not being able, the defense changed their approach in the second trial as well. In the first trial, they really focused on the conspiracy. On the second trial, they really focused on proving that he was not hit by a car, and they did obviously a really good job because she was acquitted.
Yeah, and let's break that down a little bit because I want to add in some of that. And
Sure.
I think that another painfully obvious point when you watch this, and I know that you watch this case in detail. I know that because you live with me. We're married. But
And you know that that if we ever drank a fraction of the amount of these people, one of us would probably be dead too.
yes, that's a whole nother point. But
Oh my goodness.
what was
Yeah.
very painful when I was watching this was just that awkward, you knew right away that the prosecution did not want Proctor's name on any of this. And they tried and tried and tried, and it just got embarrassing at some points.
Yeah.
Where, not only are they not putting him on the stand, but they're getting his supervisors to say that Proctor is the lead investigator. And I thought that that was a great strategy from Alan Jackson, because if you're in the jury, I would assume that when you hear this, you've got to question, why is the lead
Sure.
investigator not being called?
Not why is he constantly being referred to as former trooper Michael Proctor? I wish we could count out the number of times that Alan Jackson said that in the second trial. And fun fact, I don't think he testified in the Brian Walsh case either, where he was also the lead investigator from the Mass State Police. I mean, now he's fired, so I don't know. But anyway, yeah, he's not been seen or heard from. He's named in the new civil lawsuit, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but I don't think he testified in the prosecution for Brian Walsh.
So let's transition to the civil trial that is ongoing now. And like we said, Karen Reed was acquitted in the second trial. She had to spend a fortune with this legal team. And so
I think that in the second trial, the story is that they actually did it for pro bono.
well, I mean, she may have not have had any money left from the first trial. And I believe
No,
she
I mean,
had.
I think she's raised over $500,000 for her defense fund. I mean, she
Okay.
lost her jobs because of it. She sold her house. She cashed out her retirement. I mean, she has a really good civil claim here.
Well, there's two claims, actually. One is a wrongful death lawsuit against Karen Reed,
Against
brought
her.
on by John O'Keefe's family. And
Yep.
then she has a civil lawsuit that is filed against investigators and key Canton figures, and which she's alleging a cover-up and a frame job. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think that this will get settled out of court? Do you think that this will eventually go to trial? I know that currently they petitioned to have it in federal court, which it sounds like it's going to happen there, which is going to complex things a little bit. What are your
And
thoughts?
I'm assuming it's going to take longer as well, given that it's federal
Yeah,
and a
they're going to
civil
want to
case.
drag their feet on this. If you're the
Yeah.
state, you do not want to, and they've been the state 0 for 2.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't understand civil court really well, but I do know that the burden of proof is lower in civil court. Do you
So
know
in civil court,
what is
the
the
standard,
burden?
yeah, in civil court, the standard is preponderance of the evidence, which is more likely than not.
Okay.
And in
So I
criminal
would
court,
say,
it's reasonable doubt.
and that's tough, right? Because with the O'Keefe's civil trial, they had filed that before that. I believe they filed that before the end of the first case, or close to the end of the first trial. And at the time, it was like, well, the burden of proof is lower, so it's possible. But she's been convicted. She's convicted. No, she's been acquitted. So, I mean, I know when I think about like O.J. Simpson, we know he was acquitted and then he was found guilty in civil court. So I don't know, because civil court is different, and I don't know a lot about civil court. But I honestly think if you look at the if you compile all the evidence, it looks like the conspiracy theory is almost easier to believe by me than that Karen was more likely than not the one who hit and caused John O'Keefe to die. So I just don't know. I don't see it settling. I see potentially the O'Keefes settling their case outside, because yeah, it's gonna drag out for years. I don't know if I see a settlement between, because I think Michael Proctor is named in that, Yuri Buchanan is named in that, the Jennifer McCabe, Brian Albert, that there's like, I think there was like 9 or 10 people named in that lawsuit. And I just don't know, because don't they have to continue to like double down on their like, you know, they're innocent and this is crazy,
Not
defensive posture?
necessarily. I think that what they should be looking at, if you are on the prosecution's team, we'll say, or the state's team, and you're getting sued, is this really is going to be about how much money are you going to spend defending yourself over the next 5
True.
years? And, I think that the O'Keefe family is going to probably factor in that same equation, unless they've got someone working on this pro bono. People have to keep
Yeah.
that in mind too. Is that's a $400 an hour bill that's coming in, and you're taking a gamble of basically if you're going to be able to recoup that. And they've already
Yeah.
seen that Karen Reed is not afraid to go to trial, and she's
No.
not afraid to throw, you know, an unlimited amount of funds at the best experts she can find. And she's also not afraid to go after you afterwards, which is what she's
Well,
doing now.
that's the thing too. Like, I know we know that there are some people out there who just will use the courts for everything, right?
Right.
And maybe that's Karen Reed. But if there's a possibility that she could be exposed for hitting John O'Keefe, would she be suing all of these people?
I think that at this point, they're pretty confident in the amount of evidence that they have, or their ability to poke evidence in the prosecutions.
Poke holes, yeah, in the prosecution's evidence. Yeah, I agree.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think she has such a strong legal team. I mean, and I think Alan Jackson at this point, I mean, he hasn't come out and said this, but I think at this point he just wants to see this through, right? I think her legal team, just like the prosecution believes she's guilty, I think her legal team truly believes in her innocence, and I think that they're willing to, I think that as a lawyer, you want justice for John O'Keefe, and that's what this is all about. And justice for John O'Keefe at this point, and based on what I've seen, is not that Karen Reed goes to prison for the rest of her life.
What do you think should be done with this case?
We know that there was a federal investigation. We don't know if it's ongoing. There's been rumors that the federal investigation was closed. I think it was stated prior to the last trial, although, like we've said in conversations, that it's not like the feds to announce that they've completed an investigation. But there have been no charges filed as a result. And so I've kind of wondered, I'm like, okay, are they local feds who are part of this whole um, incestuous police group, so they're not going to bother to press charges? I don't know. I don't I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith that we're ever going to know, unfortunately.
And I think you're right about that. I do think that an outside agency would be the only way to, you know,
Yep.
put new eyes on it and see if they can come up with any other alternative theories. I just think that it's so tainted at this point, and the lack of cooperation you're also going to get from Karen Reed, from other witnesses. Now that people understand they're going to get sued for making possibly false accusations under oath, uh, I don't see many people cooperating with this.
No, no, and it's I mean, honestly, as like a citizen, a former citizen of Massachusetts, but as a citizen of Massachusetts right now, I'd be terrified because I was always I was never anti-police. I had no reason to be. I was pro-police. Thought it was great to have them in the community looking out for you. But if Karen Reed is truly innocent, then she was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they can come after you. I mean, they could have put this woman, if she didn't have the funds to get this great defense team, like, she could legitimately be sitting in prison for the rest of her life. That terrifies me. And I was never afraid of police officers because mostly because, you know, I was married to you and you were the least scary person in the world. But you just got to wonder, like, if they want to pin this on the girl, like, how terrifying is that for just the regular people walking around Massachusetts who may be in the wrong place at the wrong time? I know it can happen anywhere, right? It could happen where we live, but it's a little bit unsettling to me, and that's the piece that I don't like, and that's the piece that I really wish. I know that Canton Police Department had done they had that outside audit, and I believe that that report is available online, and I would encourage people to review it because I mean, it really did confirm what we believed an investigation should be, how an investigation should be handled. But I just, yeah, it terrifies me that those people are going to get away with this, and whoever did this, right, not likely to be Karen Reed is gonna get off, and that's just wrong.
It is, and I think people lose track of the fact that this was a police officer that was killed, and, you know, this case is still open as far as I'm concerned, and I think that's the biggest shame, is that he
Yep.
was murdered or killed, and a half-ass investigation was done at a minimum, or a max, and, you know, hopefully that doesn't get lost. You know,
No, I
everyone
mean
was talking
you
about Karen Reed and the, you know,
sorry.
her fight for justice or redemption or whatever, and I feel like that his name is getting lost, and that's a shame.
Right. You have to really consider the children that he left behind, right? Those children have lost a mother, a father, and now their uncle who is their legal guardian. Like,
Yeah.
I don't how do you recover from that? I know they're older children now, but still, how do you it doesn't matter. How do you recover from that? How do they get I mean, they got robbed. And I also think that they believe that Karen Reed is the cause of their demise, but I truly don't believe that that's true, and how awful for them. So,
Yeah, and from my standpoint, I just feel like we do not know would be the best
right.
answer.
I agree.
I think that it's entirely possible that it's as simple as Karen was drunk and that they got into an argument, and whether she intentionally hit him or not, she hit him with her vehicle, and he most likely lost his balance, hit his head, and either stumbled to where he eventually passed away, or if that is where he landed from the impact. I don't think that it makes that big of a difference. But I know I've said this 1,000 times, but we just don't know. And it's
No,
all because from the very beginning, the
great.
crime scene was not handled appropriately. The investigation was sloppy at best. You know, you
Yep.
mentioned before, these guys weren't doing an instant report to 90 days was kind of the average. They found one that was they're writing a report a year later. And
Yeah.
that was just because they probably got screamed at by their, you know, by the DA's office saying, why isn't there a report on your actions that day? where
Right. They're
what should
going
happen.
through the evidence and not
Yeah.
finding reports. Yeah.
And for those who are listening that don't have a clue of what I'm talking about is when you have an incident, it should be that you work on that instant, and then after that instant is completed or at the end of your shift, you write your
Right.
report. It was always our policy that you are not allowed to leave until your
Right.
reports are in.
I've waited many
Same thing
nights
for
for
the
you to
interview.
finish your reports.
Right, right. Yes.
Yep.
Many a time, drinking coffee after you've worked a midnight shift, trying to get your report in because you're not allowed to go to sleep. And the same thing with interviews. When anyone's interviewed, it should be that there's video and audio oversight, meaning that's in an interview room.
It's recorded. Yeah,
Right.
in an interview
Recorded.
room. Exactly. The
And then
Canton
guess
police
what you
station was
do
right there.
afterwards? What do you do after you do an interview? You write a report on the interview, and even if you've got that transcription, you're still going to write what the person said,
Right.
and that's all going to
Right.
get compiled. So this should have been a massive document where you had a rec report and every single detail about that video. Or vehicle. There should have been tons of pictures taken. A huge canvas should have been done, especially since this is a Boston police officer that was murdered. And I believe that house should have absolutely been searched. And the problem that I have is you don't even need a search warrant for that. You could get consent. If that's another police officer, why would they not give you consent to, look through the house and get some statements as well? And none of that happened.
They were trying to convince the jury that they would not have they did not have probable cause and they would not have been able to get a warrant, even though in most of these scenarios they got the warrants after they did the action. But in this case, they were going to follow the protocol and get the warrant before, but they
Right.
never
And
would.
my argument would have been, if that was my case, that house was part of the crime scene, that he had a glass in his hand, I believe. Well, the glass was broken, but we know that
Yeah.
he was supposedly going inside the house. You don't know of where your crime is. We've already questioned how much blood is where his body is. So I think that it's very likely that that's not a crime scene. And it's called a crime scene search warrant. They're not hard to get.
Yeah, and in the second trial, the defense actually had hired a witness that examined or the glasses, like the glass from the waterfall, and I guess the glass that was found around his body, because Karen walked out of the water. For those who don't know, like Karen walked out of the waterfall with her drink, and I guess or John O'Keefe ended up with it, or he ultimately had. They showed it on the waterfall video that he had it, and they found broken glass near him, aside from the taillight pieces, and it was from multiple styles of glasses. So that was very interesting.
Yeah, and
And of
this
course, they
case is
didn't go in
so
the house.
complex, right?
They,
And
they didn't
this
go in the
is
house to take the glassware, right?
yes, yeah, and right, just obvious things that should have been done. And I think that if a different department was working this, I hate to crap on the Canton Police Department because I do respect the fact that the men and women are trying to step up. I just don't think they have the leadership, training, or resources to do that job. So this is nothing personal against the officers there. This is just
Right.
a very easy observation to make, that they have crappy leadership, they've got poor training, and that they do not have the resources that they have. I could get on my rant longer. Maybe I will over dinner tonight, but
What are you cooking?
you know what? I think we're going to have cheeseburgers tonight. We're going to keep it simple. Before we go, let's get you one more plug for your show, because I believe I'm going to be helping on the editing side on this.
Yes, you are my
So tell
social
them
media.
where the show will be and where they can find you, because I think you've got an IG channel.
Do I? I know that I have a YouTube channel. Yes, I do. From Garden to Glow, and that's both YouTube and IG. Yeah, so I work full time, and I am a mom, and I love to my hobbies would be gardening and home improvements and cleaning and cooking and efficiencies. Now my wonderful gracious husband has taken over some of the cooking, but I still like to bake and experiment with making bread without a bread maker, and I'm just trying to figure out all the content ideas. I have some projects outside that I will need to take care of, and do a lot of. I have a lot of. We have a small garden in zone 8, and we have deer, and we have a lot of shade, so we have a lot of things to contend with when planting our garden. So, and I'm going to be focusing on that, but I also want to focus on doing it kind of in a minimal way. I don't like to acquire a lot of tools to do one thing. I want to do it on a budget. So I'm going to be sharing those tips, and kind of following me through my fitness journey and health journey that I'm on right now. So yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing it with everybody.
Well, great. Well, I do not know what Zone 8 is, but I do know
Agricultural zone.
I
So
do
yeah,
know that
probably
you
most
should
of the
go.
people watching this podcast are not the same audience that will likely be checking out my channel. But if you are, um, I would love to have you join.
Look, soccer moms are very popular with true crime because that's what they fall asleep to. So I do think that your
I can't
channel's
do
going to
that.
work
It's too
well.
dark. No.
Well, go ahead and like and subscribe to those channels. It's already
Yes,
up. That way, when
thank
those
you.
first videos hit, they'll, go ahead and load for you and you won't miss out any content. I think it's going to be a fun journey that you're going to have with Laura. You'll be able to see a personal side of her and some interactions with me, maybe possibly in the future. You never know. But if you would like to support me, make sure that you like and subscribe to Santana True Crime. We are available on Spotify and Apple as well. And you can pick up my book, A Murder on Campus, A Professor the Cop in North Carolina's Most Notorious Cold Case. I wrote that with my brother, the true crime professor, Dr. Brian Santana. That book
I
is
heard it's really
available.
good.
Yes, it is. And you know what? I'll even give you a signed copy for Christmas.
Thank you.
But it's available on Kindle, Audible, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere where you can buy a book. Laura, thank you very much. Hope you come
Thanks
on
for having
again.
me. All right.
All right. Good
Bye.
night.